So I'm here with Katie from CitizenX. As of like 2, 3 weeks ago, it was Plan B passports. So that's big news in your life, I'm sure, Katie. So Katie is a second passport residency citizenship expert, I would say. I've been following Katie on X for a long time now, just following what she's doing. She's big in the Bitcoin and freedom space, helping people acquire some more flexibility in their lives in terms of location and mobility. And so in this podcast, Katie, why don't we just introduce who you are to anybody that might not know you, what your background is, how you got in the space, and what you help people with.
Thank you, Anthony. Really glad to be here. Well, I'm Katie, born and raised in Russia, moved to the US when I was 21. And through my own immigration journey, realized that having second citizenship or second residency can really benefit your freedom. Just slight examples that I lived through as a new immigrant is, as a Russian immigrant in the US, I could open a bank account without social security number, while an American citizen would struggle with that greatly. And I was like, wait a second, there must be more to that. And that's how I myself stumble upon the concept of flag theory. And my definition of this concept is basically the way of limiting your dependency on any one particular state by obtaining a second passport. So I was talking a lot on X about how everybody needs a second passport. Me coming from Russia, I have this distrust in government in my DNA, like that's not going to go away. And I was just telling that everybody needs to consider their path to second citizenship, second passport. And my audience was growing, my expertise was growing. And at some point, I realized that all I'm missing is a product. So I started Plan B Passport. That was over 6 years ago. Now, fast forward to today, last month, I announced acquisition of Plan B Passport by CitizenX, which was my closest competitor in the industry. And now we join forces. I'm a CMO of CitizenX, where we help people all over the world to obtain second citizenship or residency for their benefit.
Okay. So you were just literally talking about this out of passion at first and posting on X?
Absolutely. There's a flight over here. Sorry.
I see that. Yeah.
So I often say that just like in the movie Slumdog Millionaire, where the guy just lived through all these experiences that brought him to the point where he knew all the answers to the Who Wants to Be a Millionaire questions.
Yeah.
In my life, I had all these things that made sure that at some point I'm going to become a Bitcoiner and a passport lady, because I was born and raised in Russia, seen two hyperinflations in my lifetime by the age of 20. My bank accounts were constantly shut down for no reason. I couldn't use my cards outside of Russia. I was always denied in visas to go. I was on a national sailing team at the time. And I couldn't go to Europe Cup, to World Cup, because they would deny me in visas. So all this experience is just brought me to this point where I was really hungry for freedom of the individual. So I found Bitcoin. I learned about Bitcoin early on. And then I also started selling passports.
How did you find out about Bitcoin?
Honestly, it was at the right time, in the right place. But also, again, all those prerequisites really ensured that I would be listening. But I was already in Florida. I just started learning the language. And then I'm being reached out by this friend of mine from Russia. And she's like, Katie, there's this mining company from Russia that is coming to New York for a conference. And they need somebody who speaks English to interview the conference attendees.
Wow.
At this point, I'm learning English for 10 months. And I'm like, of course I will be translator, an interviewer, a journalist, pretend to be. So I go to this conference and it's like an absolute shitcoin conference. But I find the guy that sounds really confident and I'm like, dude, what book do I read? And he says, Mastering Bitcoin. This is how you figure things out. And 8 years ago, that was honestly, the only book, but also a really good book on Bitcoin. It was very technical and not very strong in terms of economics side of things, but it did give me a great understanding of what it is that I'm dealing with and why it's important. And ever since, I've been going down the rabbit hole as deep as I possibly can.
Wow, good for you. I actually know somebody else, another girl who was hired for a random journalist job to go be a journalist at a crypto conference in New York. And she said this was about 8 years ago. It could have honestly been the same conference. Well, maybe not if this was a Russian one. But she went down as a journalist and she was telling me about it because I was telling her about Bitcoin at the time. And she's like, yeah, I did this journalist thing. And honestly, I just felt like it was a bunch of nerds and I was kind of creeped out by a lot of them. But you look back now today and they're all like multimillionaires and it's like, I should have paid attention. So to your point, maybe she just wasn't primed.
Yeah.
Because she didn't have the same upbringing that you did in Russia, whereas she grew up here in Canada and she wasn't primed to actually maybe see some of the opportunity there.
Definitely. So. And what I want to say right now about Bitcoin, the information is so good in English and the distribution of information is not streamlined to other languages just yet, although we have AI that can do everything. But primarily the knowledge base is in English. However, all those countries that have seen hyperinflation, they will understand Bitcoin so much quicker than a typical American or Canadian, because you guys had it good for a very long time. You didn't have like civil unrest, geopolitical instability didn't really touch you as much as it did my country. You didn't have like hyperinflation. Of course, inflation is hitting you all, but like not in a way that overnight you wake up with half the money you had yesterday. So it's going to be a big wake up call for those who had this comfortable life for a few generations.
Yeah. Okay. So one thing we're always told, Katie, in Canada is how good our Canadian passport is and that it's one of the best passports in the world. So first off, is that a true statement?
In some ways, yes. As a travel document, Canadian passport is very strong. You can get visa-free access to nearly everywhere, including the US, which very few countries have visa-free access to the US. So as a travel document, yes. But then if we look at overall overview of what gives a passport strength, you also need to consider having a passport is one thing. Being a tax resident is a different thing. So now, is being a tax resident of Canada a benefit or an issue? And if you look at capital gains tax and income tax in Canada, yeah, maybe it's not that beneficial to be Canadian at the time. Now, the great thing about Canada is there's no citizenship-based taxation. So as a Canadian passport holder, you can actually get out of Canada, become a non-tax resident of Canada, cut your ties with the country, and no longer pay Canadian taxes. While with the US passport, it's not actually the case. There is a citizenship-based taxation that is enforced.
Okay. So if somebody wants to build some more flexibility, mobility into their life, there's a second passport, third, fourth passport, as many passports as you want. But then there's residencies and then there's citizenships. Can you describe the differences between the three?
Yeah. So citizenship and passport basically go hand in hand. Citizenship defines your nationality, and the passport is the document that also supports this claim for citizenship and nationality. So passport is a travel document that you are allowed to have while you're a national and citizen of the country. Okay. Residency is not a travel document. That's your permit to live in a country, sometimes work in a country, stay in the country full time. So what I did notice that many Canadians go buy a second passport in a country where they don't intend to live at all. They just want to have this Plan B passport, truly a hedge against their home country government, another strong travel document in case their Canadian passport getting seized or things like that. But then on top of it, they go get a residency in the country that they actually would be interested in living. So the combo that I see often for Canadians is basically Antigua passport, because it's quite affordable citizenship, strong passport. The whole process is done remotely. They accept Bitcoin as source of funds, proof of funds, etc. But then they go ahead and they get residency in Mexico, because that's a short flight from home, and that's a nice lifestyle. The Canadian dollars go way further in Mexico than they do in Canada, and that's basically your winter destination. So you spend some time in Canada, sometimes in Mexico.
Okay. So that's one thing I didn't understand at first is like, if the Canadian passport is so good, what is the purpose of getting another one? Like, people have always told me I have Italian descent, so I would have, I think, a pathway to get my Italian citizenship and my Euro passport. And I've always just wondered in the back of my head, what's the point if the Canadian passport gets me all the same places? But I guess, as to what you said earlier, it's more of a hedge against a Canadian government restricting my travel or restricting travel of all of its citizens, something like that.
Yeah. So that definitely happened in the history of citizenships overall. You being restricted of being able to leave the country, for example, that's what's happening right now in Ukraine. All the male citizens of Ukraine cannot leave the country unless they're 60 years old plus or under 18, because there is enforced mobilization happening. So what if at some point there is civil unrest or political instability involving your country, and no matter what side your country takes, your government chooses, you have to go and fight for what they decided? Well, what if you don't stand with what's the current decision of your current administration? Can you opt out? Well, with a second passport, you can. That's just one of the 100 scenarios that I can go over. But another way that I like to look into that is like diversify your passport portfolio, right? So, for example, you mentioned that there are people with European descent. Those, I think, is a no-brainer. You have to get that. If you have, a lot of Canadians have grandparents, great-grandparents from Czechoslovak, either Czech Republic or Slovak at this point, and can claim that passport. Italian, obviously French roots, like all this can get you a second citizenship for basically free, no investment necessary. And that's just a no-brainer. And while those passports are in the EU, and Canada and EU kind of in bed together these days, it's not a great hedge, but it still is a second passport that you can utilize. In terms of diversify your passport portfolio, the way I like to look at it is right now there's no competition between nation states. You are born into this government monopoly over you. They don't have to compete for you. Only 3% of people ever switch their service provider, aka immigrate to another country. So now you have this 97% government monopoly that keeps taxing you further up. The quality of the service keep going down, just like in every government enforced monopoly, because there's no free market competition. So now that we actually start, and there's this book, Sovereign Individual, that explains this thesis very well.
It's up there, yeah.
There you go.
Yeah. Gotta move my fat head. There it is.
There it is. Basically, once we as citizens start choosing with our capital, with the fruits of our labor, we can vote with our feet, vote with our money, right? That's what we say. So once you have this choice that you can go and switch your service provider, well, now we as customers enforce this free market competition onto the governments. Now they have to compete for your capital, compete for the fruits of your labor. And we already see this unfold. COVID was actually quite the catalyst of that, because we all went remote. And now we realize, wait a second, I don't have to live in cold Canada. I can go live everywhere. I can still have access to the capital markets, to the jobs in Canada remotely, make that money and go spend where the money go further and where I actually enjoy the lifestyle, while also in some cases opting out of the high taxation. So you can see this unfolding in front of our eyes with all the citizenship by investment programs taking place. The governments truly realize, hey, we're going to attract you with policies. We're going to have zero capital gains tax. We're going to name Bitcoin a legal tender like El Salvador did. We're going to give zero taxes for tech companies to come and build here in El Salvador. Well, come and build here. And obviously people are choosing to go there because they feel aligned with the values of the current administration, and they vote with their money and they vote with their feet. So diversify your passport portfolio. And force this free market competition on those nation states.
Is this a recent trend that you're seeing? Is these programs are some like a new phenomenon? Was this not around in the 90s or early 2000s?
So the capital wasn't that movable. The capital wasn't as mobile as it is now. Even with gold, we understand that, yeah, it's a scarce asset. However, try and relocate across the border with a bunch of bars of gold. So now with Bitcoin is definitely the latest wave of this mobility of the capital being brought mainstream. But those programs do exist since 90s. Basically, some of the Caribbean offshore islands had the programs for 30 years, but it was truly for like ultra high net worth individuals. Those who wanted offshore banking, which, like, if you remember in the movies, it's like, yeah, offshore banking. Yeah. And now we know that there's the best offshore banking with 12 warts in your head. Like
that's right.
That's real right. Offshore. So the program did exist. They served a very small audience, and the audience has been growing now, and it definitely is becoming more mainstream. And again, they do have a free market competition between those citizenship by investment programs. They have to attract people, and the price is obviously going down. So like $150,000 price range in 90s and $250,000 today, like that's a very different thing. 150 grand back then was much more than 250 today. And like you can understand that the price is actually trending down because they have to compete.
Yeah, that's a beautiful thing, and I'm really happy to hear that. Hey everyone, I wanted to quickly share my personal journey with the Rockstar Inner Circle. I joined Rockstar when I was 23 years old because I wanted to learn how to invest in real estate, and I was looking for the right people to guide me. What I didn't expect was how much more the Inner Circle would give me. It's not just about investing, it's about being a part of a community that is genuinely invested in each other's success. I've learned so much here, from real estate strategies to understanding the economy, personal finance, and how the whole money system works. I've gained the knowledge to build my own business, create my own assets, and leverage the biggest trends in the world. But more than that, it's the growth mindset and personal development that have transformed how I approach life and investing. Having a community of like-minded people to share wisdom, experiences, and lessons with has been invaluable. From finding tenants and growing a real estate portfolio to designing the life you want, it's been a game changer. Being part of the Inner Circle has completely changed my perspective on money and life. The insights I've gained have helped me make smarter decisions, and I'm now way more confident in my financial future. If you're ready to level up your investing, mindset, and your life, I can't recommend the Rockstar Inner Circle enough. It's not just a membership, it's an opportunity to design the life you want. Thanks for letting me share this with you, and I hope to see you in the Inner Circle soon. If you're curious to learn more, feel free to check out rockstarinnercircle.com/get-started for free resources and see if it's the right fit for you. Now back to the show. I guess my next question would be, how accessible is this to the average Canadian, let's say, today?
Yeah, so those programs do require very thorough due diligence. That basically means that, let's say you and your family want to apply for Antigua citizenship. Going to be, let's say, $300,000 for a family of 6 with 4 kids. Well, the main applicant will have to go through a very thorough source of funds due diligence and basically say, look, the money that I spend on this program are made from legitimate source, either from investments, income, business activity, and we have to show and prove that that is the case. Then obviously all the required paperwork such as birth certificate, passports, marriage certificate, police clearance certificate from the country of your citizenship, the country of your residence, like basically anywhere you lived in the last 10 years, we need a police clearance certificate for that. We at CitizenX, obviously super white glove service, make it very streamlined for you, helping you along with every step. And the due diligence takes about 10 months as of right now. There's a little backlog happening. But the great thing, the majority of the funds are paid at the very end of the process where you get the letter of approval. So, okay, you went through due diligence, you are approved. Now, as long as you donate the money to the government or you buy that real estate in the country, you will be getting that citizenship. And then 5 weeks later, you got the passport in the mail. It's a pretty surreal feeling to, like, you open this box and there's your new passport with a nationality from a country that you've never visited. That's
Crazy.
pretty cool.
That is cool. Would you recommend visiting before you go for a citizenship?
When you buy citizenship, it's more of a strategic move that is that needs to be strategized, not in terms of where do I actually like to live, because that's where you get the residency from. But a
Okay.
strategic citizenship just requires knowing about the country, knowing about their policies, knowing the trends and what the weather is like in the industry, and then just going for it.
Okay, so separate the two out. Separate residency, where you might actually potentially want to move one day or move now, versus trying to create more strategic mobility by getting the right strategic citizenship / passport.
Yeah, and in some cases, those two will be the same, which will simplify your flag theory process. But in many cases, those will be two different countries.
Okay, so when it comes to getting a second passport, is the move to basically try to fill in as many gaps that your Canadian passport might not have?
Yes. Well, first we would, just like in every security model, right? When you try to custody your Bitcoin, you have to think, okay, do I care about inheritance or am I a single dude? Do I care about having access to a hot wallet on my phone, or do I only need like a really long-term HODL solution that is on a seed plate, digged underground in my backyard and things like that? So you consider all those goals and needs for your custody, for your security model, and then you execute. Same goes for flag theory. It is a security model in a sense. So first, let's try to understand your attack vectors, your threats. Like in Canada right now, civil unrest, definitely a threat. Canadian government being anti-Bitcoin, definitely a threat. Obviously, they can't seize your Bitcoin per se, but they do have access to your physical body. So in case 6102, which is when they took away all the gold of the US citizens, in case something like this comes for Bitcoin, where do you go? How do you find the country that is more aligned with your goals and needs? Then we see what are the jurisdictions in the toolbox. So for a direct citizenship by investment, we basically have 5 Caribbean islands: St. Kitts, Antigua, St. Lucia, Dominica, Grenada. We also have Turkey, which has an absolute shit show happening with hyperinflation inside the country, but it is a great hedge because it's on the other side of political spectrum for you. Now we also have Portugal Golden Visa Program, which is interesting because Portugal has 0 long-term capital gains taxes on Bitcoin. We also have El Salvador, which is another great option. So we consider what is on the table and what fits your goals and needs. And then we also strategize what's going to be the price like for you and your family. So all these things, usually we just allow you to create an account on CitizenX so you have access to all the options. And then you just schedule a free consultation with me and we go over all these goals and needs and what fits for you. And then we start executing the boring, bureaucratic paperwork process.
I can see the value in working with somebody that would take care of the bureaucratic process for sure.
Yeah, I've had clients who came to us because they started the process, realized they just never going to finish it by themselves. And yeah, that's where we come in.
Yeah. Okay. So I think just before joining CitizenX, or I'm not exactly sure how the merger works entirely, but you just helped someone we know, their wife, get an Irish passport. And so I'm guessing that was citizenship by descent.
Correct.
So that would be, you mentioned it earlier, like that's a no-brainer to get. That would be your first step if you're looking into flag theory, correct?
Yeah. If you have European roots or even Latin American roots, just consider, can it get you a passport? Do you qualify for this citizenship by descent? And we actually help with qualification. You just fill up the family tree and we go dig and see if you qualify, because the lineage must not be broken for some jurisdictions. So yeah, the friend of ours, she was qualified for the Irish citizenship, and we made that happen, which I believe Irish citizenship is one of the coolest to have these days.
Oh, okay. So the lineage isn't broken. What does that mean?
Basically, imagine your Italian great grandfather moved to Canada as a 6-year-old child and obtained Canadian citizenship through his parents at 6 years old. So that means his kids will not be born Italian anymore because as a minor, he changed the nationality, basically.
Okay.
Just an example of it, but some jurisdictions don't care about broken lineage. Some jurisdiction naturalizing in the new country did not mean that you lost your previous nationality. In other jurisdictions, there are also female rule, which basically up until 1983, women could not hold their citizenship by themselves. They had to have it through either their father or their husband. So once, let's say, an Italian woman got married to a Canadian man, she automatically lost her Italian citizenship and obtained the Canadian one, which again breaks the lineage. But those can be argued in some ways.
Okay. That sounds fair, eh?
Yeah.
That sucks. Okay. When it comes to residencies now, is there any residency where you can also get a passport, or no? You have to entirely separate them out.
So the residency in most scenarios will lead you to a citizenship and a passport. So just like you see a lot of immigration happening to Canada, people come on a visa, get their residency, and then 5 years later, they can naturalize into being Canadian. Same goes for, let's say, you get your Mexican residency through financial solvency program, which basically means, look, I have $70,000 in my brokerage account, give me the residency. And that's all it takes. And then, or you buy real estate in Mexico, that works too. On this basis, you obtain residency, you keep it running for 5 years, with the last 2 years you actually have spent at least 183 days a year in the country. And now 5 years later, you actually meet the qualification of being able to go through naturalization. You apply for the passport for naturalization, you pass the language exam, which is not too strict, plus some history exam of the country, and here you go, you get the Mexican citizenship.
Okay, so that could be another viable path for people.
Definitely. It's like a low time preference path.
Yeah, and I guess you would actually have to be living in the country and intend to have a future in that country, or at least
in most cases
spend a significant amount of time there.
Yeah, some countries like El Salvador, they do have direct program for citizenship. $1 million, you get citizenship in 2 months. Or you can, for free, go and get the residency there as long as you meet the financial requirements. But in order to renew this residency every year, you actually have to be a tax resident of the country, which means spend 183 days in the country a year. So you spend the 5 years as a resident of the country, you can apply for naturalization for the same $1 million passport.
Do you work with...
Mm-hmm.
Sorry, finish your thought.
Yeah, it's just basically, do you need it now? Do you want it now? Or are you willing to relocate and spend 5 years there? So it's a completely different clientele, obviously.
Do you work with a lot of Canadians?
I do. Yeah. Over the last week, I was just telling my Canadian friends that the traffic from Canada has exploded for us ever since election happened. My ex account is constantly being followed by people with Canadian flags in their bio, or Canada is their location. And I'm like, okay. I was actually telling that I don't need to read news. I can just look at what kind of applicants I get for my free consultations through the CitizenX website. And like, I know there is a spike of instability happening in the country if I get like an influx of clientele from that country.
Yeah, your email inbox is like the barometer for political instability, attacks on freedom.
Yep, that's a good one.
Okay.
I'm going to use it for a tweet.
Yeah, there you go. So Canadians, especially after the election. So what are you seeing? What are the commonalities from these people reaching out? They're obviously not happy with how it went, or they're scared of the new administration.
Well, I'd say there are a few things. First of all, yes, they're unhappy with the selected representative for the country. And they realize that they're not they're not aligned with the direction of the country. So they either want to relocate already, or they just want to have this plan B passport in case their worst nightmares realize in a country. Sometimes it comes with taxes, and sometimes it is about the civil unrest that may take place. Because like right now, we see a lot of takes on Alberta seceding. Well, those who like, it's not going to be like secession has never gone without an unrest, right? So there has to be either financial incentive for the other party, or they're going to fight for it. So they're afraid of that happening. And just like after every election, there is a wave of people being unhappy and leaving. So,
on either side of the aisle?
Yeah, basically always. So 4 years ago, during the COVID times, and when the Democratic Party got to the office in the US, I had like a huge influx of clientele. Well, 4 years later, I also have a huge influx of clientele, although the other party is in the office. So it's understandable. Like, people see the future in a certain way, and if it doesn't play out the way they want, they go and vote with their feet, which again, I believe this is the kind of voting that will actually make a difference. Like, obviously we see trends going left and right after elections, but what actually will make the difference is when we enforce this free market competition on nation states, and they actually will try to have to be better. Because right now it's just the race of money printers.
Yeah.
No matter who's in the office, the printer will keep brr.
Yeah. In any country.
Yeah.
It is almost like a race to the bottom. But with all of the technology of the internet, the decentralization of information and access to information, and now the decentralization and access to mobile capital, such as Bitcoin, yeah, you can see where the puck is headed. You can see that it's opened up the gateways to the sovereign individual thesis, even if it's just a very small percentage of people, even over the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years, obviously that number is going to continue to grow.
Yeah. And just like we're talking about sovereign individual thesis and the governments competing for the capital and fruits of your labor and the citizens, well, Bitcoin being the most mobile form of capital, like, the governments will have to specifically compete for Bitcoiners, because the Bitcoin per capita or Bitcoin per citizen, it will be the indicator of the well-being of the country at some point. And this is what El Salvador is doing. Again, they're stacking hard as they can as the country. They're also trying to attract as many Bitcoiners as they possibly can with great policies, with the community and everything. So the history is written by the winners, obviously, but like with Bitcoin, we can truly keep receipts of who was stacking, who was against Bitcoin. And 20 years from now, we will see that the countries that had the highest Bitcoin per citizen ratio will be on top. So Canada should definitely consider that and use it as a way out of potential severe crisis.
I agree. I just don't see it happening.
You know what's interesting? Dave Bradley, that I talked to this morning, told me that in Sovereign Individual, which I've read so many times and I don't remember that point, they predict that Canada will be the first big country to break out, and Alberta will be the first one to exit. Because the Sovereign Individual talks about the end of nation states and smaller states emerging and attracting individuals, and they predicted that Alberta would be the one.
Did they really?
Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy.
I don't remember that, but I'm going to reread it because I just had a call with him a couple hours ago.
No way.
Yeah.
Holy smokes. That book is scary.
Yeah, I know. It's 30 years old.
Who are these guys? Like, I've tried listening to a podcast. I think Robert Breedlove had one of them on his show.
Crazy.
And it didn't come across as well as the book did. It was almost like I couldn't believe that was the guy that wrote it. Like, I don't know if he wasn't explaining it well, but I was like, dude, you predicted the future. Like, what's going to happen next? Like, tell me more. Like, but I haven't heard them anywhere else. And maybe maybe I wasn't listening properly to it, but that book is incredible. I don't know one thing it's predicted that hasn't happened. It predicted narrowcasting, so everybody broadcasting from their phones, like the decentralization of media broadcasting. It predicted cryptocurrencies, what's going to happen to nation states as a result of the ability to mobilize capital and protect it from nation states and reduce taxes. Like, there's other things. It's been about 4 years since I've read it, but it's incredible.
Yeah, highly recommend this book to everybody.
Yeah, even the pandemic, it actually mentioned, you know, how pandemics could be created and distributed, and
mind-blowing, huh?
Mind-blowing. Yeah. Wow. Okay. I got to reread it now to find that Alberta part.
Yeah, same.
Okay. So Canadians specifically, you're seeing a lot of them do the Antigua citizenship.
Yeah.
And then residency in Mexico.
Yeah. And the residency can be done in different countries, but Latin America specifically, Mexico the most, because it's the closest, probably direct flights from many citizens in Canada. But yeah, El Salvador is definitely the other one for those who are willing to relocate, like truly relocate for the majority of the year. Costa Rica, obviously, we know friends, Canadian friends, relocating to Costa Rica. That's basically the three. Portugal would be another one, again, because zero long-term capital gains tax on Bitcoin right now, but less so for like part-time relocation.
Okay, so the big places that we see our clients, people in our lives wanting to relocate to, or already relocating, or at least buying property in, potentially setting up a future there, or spending a significant amount of time now, is Florida, actively looking down in Florida, and Costa Rica, buying vacation properties, renting them out as Airbnbs, spending time there, and Mexico.
Mm-hmm.
So does that make sense to you, those three locations as being favorable for Canadians?
Absolutely. Yeah, I can definitely see the three. I would say those who buy vacation properties do not necessarily try to change their tax residency, definitely. Like they're not there yet. But it is a first step to like having the bug out home in a way. Like, yes, it's called vacation property, but when you start considering civil unrest, it does become your bug out home. So that definitely makes sense. You know, funny thing that I noticed, there are many Canadians who are actually interested in moving to the US, and they think that US immigration is like so hard. Well, as a Canadian, it is so easy to move to the US. Like there's so many easy programs to just move to Texas or Florida, whatever you want. It's almost like a best kept secret in Canada. Everybody thinks it's so hard.
Really? Okay. Yeah. Could you describe what it takes? Like what these programs are?
So there are a lot of programs for highly skilled professionals. You probably heard of the whole H-1B drama on Twitter a few months ago, but there are actually special visas for highly skilled professionals. So in any industry, this highly skilled professional can get a long-term visa. I personally moved to the US on EB-1 program, which is a program that directly goes to green card permanent residency through my professional abilities. I was a professional athlete at the time in the top 20 world ranking, and they gave me the green card. Well, back then I thought it was so hard, but now I look at statistics, 92% approval for those highly skilled professional green cards.
Wow.
Yeah. Okay. So entrepreneurs can definitely move to the US through O1 or EB1 programs. That's a very common thing. Investor visa will be another one. Spousal, if your spouse is from the US, that's obviously easy. So there are definitely options.
Yeah. Now the entrepreneurial ones and the investor ones, do you have to invest a certain amount of money into your business in the US or into property? Like what can you invest in? How much money do you have to invest?
Yeah, basically, I'm not going to lie, because I don't personally provide immigration to the US as a service. I do direct to some good lawyers depending on the program. So L1 visa, basically you can start your own business or you can purchase business in the US for about $300,000. Make sure it qualifies for L visa. Basically, it creates some jobs. That qualifies you for a 3-year L visa, and then the visa can be turned into a green card. Investor visa, I believe it's currently at $70,000 required investment into your own business, which is not that hard, honestly. So that's the programs I would consider for sure.
Yeah. So Rockstar right now is acquiring their E2 visa, which is opening a business in the US. And we have to hit, I believe, $80,000 is the spend, 70 to 80, something like that.
Yeah, that's what I meant for e-visa.
Yes. Yeah. To hit the spend for us to be able to do that. Okay. What about Costa Rica?
Basically, you put some money in a local bank that qualifies you for residency, and then as long as you keep the residency running for a while and actually spend 180 days a year, you will then be able to submit for naturalization. If your audience is young, I should also mention the anchor baby route. So many countries in Latin America will give, let's say you're having a baby in Brazil. The baby gets the Brazilian and Canadian citizenship right away. The parents get the residency right away. And a year later, the parents can get citizenship.
Wow.
Yeah. So it's called birth tourism. So go have a baby elsewhere and stack those citizenships.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So I think people have been doing that in Canada for years.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, that's a program here.
Well, I don't know how it would qualify the parents, how long it would take for parents to get it. But even in the US, if the baby is born in the US, the baby becomes American right away. The thing is, parents won't be able to benefit from it until 18 years later, when the child is no longer minor and can apply for a family reunion. So you really need to look at what the country's policies are like for the citizenship based on birth and the parents for that child born there. But yeah, the most popular jurisdictions for that are Mexico, Costa Rica, Brazil, Argentina. That's basically it.
Wow. Okay. I guess these rules and laws and programs are always changing. And so you almost would you personally bank on 18 years later, this family reunion thing? Could that be easily changed?
Probably those parents who go have a baby in America are not actually doing it for the relocation 18 years later. They're mostly doing it to open up those, let's say, college opportunities for the child. But when we talk about American and Canadians having a baby in Brazil, that's probably for the passport.
Wow. Okay. Do you primarily work with Bitcoiners? Is that just the audience that you've been able to tap into, or at least the people that are interested in this? The Canadians you're working with, are they mainly Bitcoiners? Are they average Canadians? Who are these people?
Mostly Bitcoiners, simply because the concept of sovereign individual just already understood by Bitcoiners. So the second passport makes a lot of sense right away, just clicks for them. With Plan B Passport, when I first started, I never paid for any marketing. All I was doing is tweeting about it, and the audience was growing. Up until lately, when I started running some ads here and there. With CitizenX, it's naturally, no matter where we run ads, Bitcoiners take up a big chunk of audience, simply because, again, they're just so aligned with this concept. So yeah, I'd say primarily my audience is Bitcoiners.
Wow. How did you figure all this out for yourself? Do you need some sort of credentials to be in this business, by official standards, or?
I think originally it's just going through my own immigration. So when I moved to the US, I got scammed by an immigration lawyer here in the US. I paid her $12,000. She ghosted me, disappeared. Still, 8 years later, I don't know where she is. So I had to self-represent. And as I self-represented, I realized I'm pretty good at it. So I started digging further and further. And 9 years later, it's still my job.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's clearly a growing trend and a great space to be in.
Definitely. Yeah. And with the mobile capital in form of Bitcoin, with remote jobs, it's accelerating, definitely. So I'm in this extremely growing market. And the growth is just taking care of our company's growth. Okay.
So you're with CitizenX now. What does CitizenX offer people?
Yeah, CitizenX is basically white glove service privacy and security crazy platform that for all your citizenship needs for citizenship by investment and citizenship by descent. Um, I think the best things about the platform is full transparency on the price. If you go to any of the competitors, which there are quite a few, you will always be like guessing what are the next fees, etc. We made it very precise, very clear. We automated lots of paperwork problems such as translation, and we also took care of privacy and security component of that because Bitcoiners naturally value that a lot. Like, we don't want people to know what's in our pockets. We also don't want them to have access to all our private data. So we took care of that. And then we just brought as many options as we could to this platform. So you go there and you find all the information you need from A to Z, and there's no second best.
Is that the official slogan?
No, it really isn't. It's just Michael Saylor's slogan. Or what?
I know. Wow. Okay. There's just so much to learn in this space. Like, it's very overwhelming unless you know exactly what country you want to be in, at least for residency. I guess that makes things more clear because you can focus on that one country. But when it comes to citizenship, I can see how overwhelming it would be.
I always say immigration is a skill because for me, I know that I can pick any country on earth and I know how to relocate my entire family there legally without any issues. So I understand that it sounds scary. It's so much paperwork and bureaucracy, but that's why CitizenX exists. So we can lead everybody's hand through this entire process.
Yeah. I think unless you're fortunate enough to have built a lot of wealth in your life through real estate, like many of our clients, through more and more Bitcoiners, I guess the one thing that I think holds people back, because you hear it all the time, especially around elections, like, so-and-so gets in, I'm out. So-and-so gets in, I'm out. Or I'd love to live in a warmer climate. Mm-hmm. That's a main thing for Canadians, right? We used to have a lot of stuff kind of holding us here in Canada because it was a great country. And a lot of us feel like some of those great qualities have been eroding over time. And so with the cold weather and less of those great qualities, there's more and more of a pull to warmer destinations, right? And I guess a big limit to that is having a mobile income, because the incomes that we're used to in Canada with the Canadian dollar, which is, relatively strong around the world, I guess, compared to many other weaker currencies, we have much higher purchasing power through our wages than we would if we, let's say, move down to Costa Rica and earn in the local wage there. So I guess how important is having a mobile income to accomplish these things, unless you have a big enough stack of wealth that you're ready to retire and kind of live off your wealth?
Yeah. Don't even try to do any of that if you don't have the mobile income or stash.
Got it.
Your quality of life will decrease because not only you're moving to a country where you don't know the local mentality. You're literally at so many disadvantages there.
Yes.
You don't have the mentality. You don't have the language. You don't know people to connect to you. You literally have no idea what to do there. While moving there on a Canadian income, you're at all the advantages. You don't care about the language anymore because everything is up for grabs with your money. You can purchase comfort, way higher comfort than you could for the same money in Canada. Just to give you an example, I was living in Mexico 6 years ago. I was renting a penthouse, 3-bedroom penthouse for $1,200, months to months, no contract, nothing. So it's like the highest rates. $1,200 for a penthouse with a pool. And it's like, good luck surviving on that money in Canada,
Oh my God. I don't even know what $1,200 would get you a room in a student rental near a university now.
Yeah.
No pool. Definitely no pool, Katie. Yeah.
So, a lot of younger people just move to Mexico on a remote job. They're still paycheck to paycheck in Canada. They can't invest. They can't do anything. They're surviving on that income. They move to Mexico, Costa Rica, anywhere. They live much more comfortable life, and they're also able to invest now because there's so much of released income that doesn't have to be spent on produce or shelter.
Are you seeing that? Are you working with young Canadians or?
So I don't necessarily have a product for them, but it is a huge market. Just living in Mexico showed me that, yeah, that's huge. As long as they have remote job or some income through, let's say, entrepreneurial activity online, they're going to be so much better off, and so much more comfortable in Latin America.
And you can live there temporarily on a visa. Are there digital nomad programs? I think Costa Rica has something like that, right?
Yeah, almost all countries in Latin America now have some form of financial solvency program. Usually, like Mexico requires you to show $3,500 worth of income in order to grant you residency. El Salvador, $1,200. Brazil, $2,000. So if you can show that income, you're welcome to stay.
So it's like you got to show $2,000 hitting your bank account for, let's say, 12 months, whatever the requirement would be, and you're allowed to stay.
Yep.
Okay, so I've heard of somebody living in Costa Rica, and like they're like, I don't even have a residency. Like I just live down here, pura vida. It just works, and I'm just like, so you don't even need that? I mean, I guess it's like.
So many people just do a visa run. Basically, you own your Canadian passport. Let's say you're allowed to stay 90 days in Mexico. You spend 90 days, you take $150 flight to, I don't know, Texas and back, or Florida and back. You renew your entrance date. Now you have another 90 days. So you just leave for a day, come back. And like that will put you in the position where you're never illegally in a country. But you have to know that when you're just a tourist in a country, you can not open a bank account, cannot get driver license. Sometimes it's going to be hard to get a rental, long-term rental. So you're limited, definitely. You're a tourist. You're on tourist rights. So if you want to put roots, definitely go through financial solvency residency programs. That's just going to make your life easier long-term.
Okay, so if you're a young person, like as you build up the capital, as you can save money, and maybe as you grow a family, look towards putting those roots down.
Absolutely.
Okay. Where do you see this all going, Katie? Like you're in the daily trenches. You're seeing all these big trends happen. Your inbox is the barometer. How do you see this continuing to play out?
So I see it actually, even so we're like globally traveling so much more, it's actually going to be all the way around from globalization, just like in sovereign individuals, they talk about really small states attracting very certain type of individuals. So what I'm hoping is increase in those very localized communities, attracting new citizens, new residents, and truly providing this kind of like free cities, special economic zones for those to come and build. And that's what I already see taking place. Now, the timeline is always a question, but I think in the next 12 years, that is going to just skyrocket. Everybody's going to be very mobile. Everybody's going to be fighting for the fruits of labor of those new citizens. All the nation states will be fighting. And Bitcoin per citizen will definitely become this like very important measure for countries and their success.
So it'll almost be like the new measurement of wealth and success instead of GDP.
Yeah.
It'll be Bitcoin per citizen.
Yeah.
That makes total sense. Like we often talk about here, obviously how poor of a metric GDP is. Absolutely terrible metric. It's flawed in so many ways. Like what would be better is to measure like what is the purchasing power of each citizen? What is the savings rate of each citizen?
What's the country's debt?
What's the country's debt? Like, is the average citizen's quality of life going up over time? Forget GDP, because GDP is going to go up forever because it's priced in dollars, which get printed up forever. So you're measuring it in something that's printed out of thin air. It's a flawed measurement. And we can all feel our lives objectively getting harder, you know, despite what they want to psyop us into thinking that, you know, things are getting better. I mean, they are in some ways, but the average citizen, I think, just feel, at least in Canada, which is one of the most developed countries on earth, like one of the most prosperous countries. Like I don't want to misrepresent that, but the average citizen here has felt like their life has gotten a lot harder in the last 5 years, 10 years, 15 years, as opposed to easier.
I just thought about a funny thing about Canadians, about some of my Canadian clients.
Okay.
I think it's another perk. You guys are so convinced that your healthcare is good.
Oh my God. Yes. And it's not free either, right?
It's ridiculous how bad it is and how much the Canadians care about that access to healthcare. Like, oh, but if I become a non-resident of Canada, I won't have access to this healthcare. And I'm like, good. That's a great thing because now you'll free up so much money that you can have the best healthcare compared to what you're trying to get. So yeah, that's a really.
Katie, I don't think you understand. We are brainwashed from birth to think that our healthcare system is the greatest, thing ever invented. It's the best thing since sliced bread is the Canadian healthcare system.
Yeah, and then I see Canadians go into private hospitals in Mexico and just be mind blown how for like $70 that they get MRI in 1 hour, and then a doctor comes and talks to them for 2 hours for another $20, and they go through all kinds of possible solutions. And it's like, yeah, I think that this $90 really did buy you more than the 43% tax that you paid there.
Oh my goodness. Okay. So this is a great point. What do you think of Canada as a place to live, to pay taxes in? What are the pros? What are the cons from an outsider looking in and dealing with us?
Yeah. So it's such a special case for everybody. Me being a mom of two, I realize now that having access to grandparents and having a family nearby is like such a huge deal for me that I understand that I can't discount that. Having access to, growing up speaking English is already a huge advantage in the world because that's the most spoken language. It probably won't be as advantageous going forward with the AI translating like on the spot. But me learning English has opened so much opportunities for me that I would never be able to tap into as a Russian citizen with Russian language only. So being born in Canada and having a strong passport is a great deal. Now, staying in Canada right now doesn't make sense for all the people. It does for some, but for kids out of college or 20 plus, I would 100% relocate from Canada right now, at least for a certain amount of time. Go explore the world, work remotely for a Canadian company, make that money, invest that money into a better thing than just covering your shelter. That just makes a lot of sense. For Bitcoiners, not having to pay capital gains tax on Bitcoin when they're willing to leave off of that Bitcoin, relocation also makes sense. But I understand why people stay. It makes sense for many. So I'm not going to say you all got to leave. Absolutely not. But consider having a plan B. Consider spending time in another jurisdiction that interests you to see if that's a good full-time residency or at least part-time residency. And after that, consider if you can get out of Canadian taxation.
Okay. And how do you get out of Canadian taxation?
Cut ties with the country. Basically, you will have to rent out or sell your primary real estate. You will have to shut down some of your bank accounts, etc. There's an entire process of breaking up with Canada. And you also have to have an established residency elsewhere, like residency permit or a second citizenship, in order to claim that, look, I'm no longer tax resident of Canada, I'm here. Another interesting thing for Canadian that I think we should discuss is what if Alberta secedes and becomes its own jurisdiction?
Okay. Go on.
Would you want to stay a Canadian citizen or would you want to be an Alberta citizen?
Oh, hell no. I'm out. I want Alberta.
So at the time of secession, you want to make sure that your utility bill, your residential address is in Alberta. So you are part of the secession, right?
Yeah.
So that's something for strategic thinking that you need to consider.
Emotionally, Kate, so we're in Ontario,
Yeah.
a few provinces over, and emotionally, I want to be Albertan, but physically, I'm here in Ontario. My parents are here. My
I
fiance's parents are here. You know, our lives are here. But I'm like, I've been thinking about that myself. I'm like, oh, is this a limited window of opportunity to jump over to Alberta where things could be potentially a bit more prosperous in the future?
Yeah, well, as a real estate investor, you know how to get your utility bill and residential address in Alberta, probably.
Yeah, very true. That is, I think, one advantage I think a lot of listeners of the show would have is all the experience that they have with real estate specifically and real estate investing when it comes to investing in a property somewhere, living in there, renting it out when you're not there. I think that would be a big advantage in this world. No?
Definitely. Like in many countries, purchasing real estate gets you a residency or a citizenship.
Yeah.
And while many people opt out of that and would rather go with donation route because they don't understand the real estate market and they can't do research for the local real estate market properly, maybe your audience would actually consider that. Like one of the good examples for this program would be Turkey. Turkey only has, well, they have another program of keeping money in the bank, but real estate purchase has been working out really great for my clients. They purchase real estate usually in a mid stages development because they have to hold this real estate for 3 years and then they can sell it but keep the citizenship. So they buy real estate, it gets built in the next 12, 18 months, then they hold it for another 18 months and sell it and keep the citizenship. So your audience being into real estate might be able to take advantage of the Turkish program.
Okay. I actually know someone. I rented out his property to tenants a few times and he moved over to Turkey. And I was talking to him on the phone, you know, what's it like there, blah, blah, blah. And he's like living on a beach somewhere and genuinely likes it. And here I am, the sucker renting out his property over here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there's a lot of chaos internally in Turkey, definitely. Yeah. As a Plan B passport, it's really good. And because the currency is getting debased there on even higher rate than anywhere else in the world, the real estate has been appreciating quite a bit because that's what they know. That's where they put money as a safe haven there. Just like in a hyperinflation environment, real estate goes up.
Yeah, in the local currency, you're getting rich, whereas globally, you're just getting decimated.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. You mentioned Canadians with the healthcare thing, which is just funny to me, right? Any other, I guess, insights or observations of Canadians that hold them back from doing this, or just any general observations? Because it's interesting hearing that, right? Like one thing that we're told a lot here is how dangerous maybe countries in Latin America are.
Yeah.
And so that's definitely a big thing with, you know, people that move down to Mexico or Costa Rica. When I've talked to other people here and freedom oriented people here, like even people in our kind of rockstar community, pushback I get is, well, like, you know, in Costa Rica, they have to have bars on all the windows, you know, and barbed wire on your fences and stuff. And when I went down there myself, definitely in the city of like San Jose, I found that was the case. But then in more rural areas or beachy areas, expat kind of communities, it wasn't the case there. So, and then in Mexico, you know, you hear a lot of news about the cartels and how dangerous it is. But I know these two rockstar investors that we work with, longtime clients that kept their rental portfolio up here and then moved down to Mexico, and they built a ranch for themselves and they live in a beautiful community down in Mexico of expats, and their kids go to private school, and they haven't said anything about the safety. They said it's completely safe where we are. So I guess from an outsider looking in, and maybe it's just the propaganda we hear, maybe it's just general fear about safety. How do you feel about all that when it comes to safety and crime?
Few things. Part of it, definitely propaganda. The second thing is, you know your life in Canada. You know where not to go because it's a dangerous area. Yeah. You know how not to act because you will be hit in the face. You come to Mexico and you don't know those things. So you have to be careful. And as a 30-year-old, you're like, I have to learn a new way. So that's just doesn't come natural. But I was living in Mexico as a 25-year-old blonde girl all by myself. I did have my phone stolen from me once, but that was the worst thing that happened in a year and a half. I've never felt unsafe, but at the same time, we are Bitcoiners, we're preppers. So I always say that, yeah, learn some martial arts, keep an eye on you at least.
Yeah. Okay. So just use your head, use common sense.
Yeah. There's like a gray man game that you can play in Latin America that is really hard for Americans and Canadians because you stand out regardless. But I've tried to play this game on the streets of Mexico. Like, there are people that come and go, and you try to notice certain things about people. And then you see a man and there's nothing to notice about him. Like, he doesn't have a watch. He doesn't have crazy shoes. Like, he just blends in. Like, there's nothing that is memorable about this guy. And you're like, oh, this is how I need to look. So as you come to a new country, learn the local way, understand what makes you look different, sound different, obviously in the language, but like understand what makes you stand out as an outsider and try to minimize those. That will take care of your safety quite a bit, actually. You wouldn't even realize. And then also understand what areas you should never go to and where you can safely be at 2 a.m. in the morning and still be safe. But yeah, a lot of it is propaganda. I was in Guadalajara, Mexico, which is a big city in the mountains, like the further down Rocky Mountains, and I felt incredibly safe. I was walking the streets of El Salvador just 3 months ago with my computer on me, with 2 phones in my hand. Nobody even looked at me. I left my backpack on a beach with all the electronics because I was taking a surf lesson. Nobody cared about it. So there are lots of countries in Latin America that are at least as safe as Toronto, if not more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And just like in Toronto, there's different neighborhoods you avoid and different people you avoid. And it's kind of just common sense, right? Can I ask what you personally do? Like you mentioned, you lived in Mexico with as much privacy as you want. Obviously, you don't have to mention anything you don't want to. Like, how do you personally navigate this flag theory and your own personal setup? You mentioned you have kids. Like, how do you navigate all of this yourself?
Yeah, well, I was born and raised in Russia. I have a residency in the United States. I also took care of a few more Plan B things for my family. Currently, we're in Austin, Texas, which honestly, right now, it is, all things considered, the best location for me and my family. Considering that my husband and I and the kids can live literally anywhere in the world, whatever we want, whenever we want, we are still choosing to be in Austin. There's family, there's access to alternative healthcare. Like I'm having my kids at home, which is almost illegal in Canada, by the way.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's the midwifery is very centralized there. Yeah, so all these things made me choose Texas for right now. But I'm never fully set on anything forever because I know there are geopolitical trends that I need to understand, that I need to keep in mind, and family needs change. Again, it's a security model, and your custody needs change, your security needs change, and yeah, we're open about other things.
Yeah. Cool. I can just tell from your mindset, like the background you mentioned, growing up in Russia and experiencing maybe the end of communism and the hyperinflation episodes, like you have such a totally different mindset, I think, than the average Canadian, because I think we've been spoiled for a long time in this country with relative peace and security and safety and strong community. And some of that is unraveling a little bit. Different people with immigrant backgrounds here that have come from places like Russia or post-communist countries or Latin American countries like Argentina that have experienced hyperinflation and crime, immigrated here, like they're speaking about it, like all the warning signs are here of what's happening. And so I just think it's important for people to be aware of that did grow up here. People like myself that have been, blessed with a great upbringing here need to be more aware of these types of things as time goes on, I think.
Yeah,
And it's an insurance policy at the end of the day, right?
definitely. Yeah, nobody's fully insured from this happening in their country. And just thinking about it, like forewarned is forearmed, basically. If you considered it, you have a plan, you sleep better at night, and in case things happen, you pull the trigger.
What did you say forward is for?
Forewarned. Okay, it's gonna be hard.
Okay.
Forewarned is forearmed.
Okay. Yeah.
Okay. Like it's a saying we have in Russian, and then I was looking for how to translate it. But yeah, basically, if you have heads up, if you prepared, if you're warned, if you're warned, you can be prepped.
Mm-hmm. And I guess for different people, like this is playing offense. For other people, this is like playing defense. Like maybe if you've built some wealth here and you've built up a life for yourself, and maybe you're cashing in on that wealth, and you're afraid of someone like Mark Carney, let's say, and he's anti-Bitcoin. So, okay, I need to protect myself. So that's kind of like defense insurance policy. But to your other point about like young 20 plus people, and all their income here is going towards paying for their housing, and they don't have much disposable income beyond that for saving even Bitcoin, even if they knew about it and understood it. It's almost like offense to just get mobile income, go see the world, go travel, go experience life in a way you'll never be able to here in Canada, the place you grew up. And you're actually going to be much further ahead financially while doing so.
Absolutely.
So it's like offense for them, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay, cool. Katie, thank you so much. I'm just laughing all the times you meant to bring up Canada. You just start laughing, which is hilarious to me. Just it's always good to get like an outside observer's thoughts, right, on like how we are as a people, you know. Yeah. And the healthcare one is such a huge hang up for people, which is funny.
It is really funny to me.
Oh no, you froze.
Can you hear me?
Hey, yeah, sorry, you temporarily froze. Yeah.
And I'm going to Canada at the end of June for Bitcoin Rodeo.
Oh, cool. Okay, awesome. So I think maybe some of us on the team might be going. Yeah. So yeah, that'd be great to potentially, see you there.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, very nice to meet you.
Yeah, very nice meeting you as well. If people want to reach out to now CitizenX, do people contact you directly through CitizenX? How should people reach out?
My email is katie@citizenx.com. My Twitter handle is PlanBPassport. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Okay, Katie, real pleasure meeting you. Thank you for the conversation. I appreciate it. And let's see how many Canadians keep flooding your inbox. I don't know. You're going to be busy for the next little bit, maybe until the next election. I don't know.
Definitely. Well, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Katie.